Hello and welcome to the video. Today I'm going to take you through the top 3 exercises to help you fix a mid-sticking point in the bench press. If when you're failing a bench press, you fail around that mid point, you're able to press the bar about halfway through your range of motion, but then it slows down, comes to a halt and then comes crashing back down onto you, this is the video for you. So without further ado, let's get to it. So these exercises are in no particular order, but the first exercise is the board press. Now, the main advantage of the board press is that because you are reducing the range of motion you're using, you're going to be able to load the board press much heavier. You're going to use heavier weights than you would on a regular bench press. This means that you're going to be used to pressing these heavier weights from your mid-sticking point all the way up to lockout, and then when you go back to regular bench pressing, it is going to feel very light because you are going to be used to pressing much heavier weights through these sticking points and the top range of motion. For example, if your normal 1 rep max is 100 kilos, your board press 1 rep max could be 120 kilos, and if you spent some time doing board presses and built up to some heavy doubles and triples at 90% of your board press 1 rep max, 90% of 120 kilos is 108 kilos. You would be doing reps at 108 kilos. 8 kilos more than your regular bench press 1 rep max. So then when you went back to regular bench pressing, you're used to pressing much heavier loads through this mid-sticking point and all the way up to lockout. You're going to easily be able to blast through that mid-sticking point on a normal bench press and you will set PRs. The next benefit of the board press, which leads on from this, is that you're going to become way more confident in the regular bench press in this mid-sticking point. Because you've been using heavier loads than your regular bench press, right from when you unrack the weight is going to feel much lighter. There is nothing worse than unracking a bench press and just knowing that you stand no chance of pressing that bar back up. It feels way too heavy. However, if you spent time board pressing and you're used to pressing heavier weights, even though it's through a smaller range of motion, you're going to become so much more confident when you go back to regular bench pressing and you unrack a much lighter weight. You'll go for the bench press, you'll be able to get it up as soon as you hit the midpoint. You're going to feel confident to blast through that mid-sticking point and press up to lockout. Now, what is very important is when you're doing a board press to address this mid-sticking point weakness, I would use around a 2 to 4 inch thick board. You can use multiple different boards and spend time doing different work at different thickness of board, but I would do between 2 and 4 inches. And the reason for this is if you have a mid-sticking point, which could be 6 inches up off your chest, the weakness that actually caused the bar to stop 6 inches up will start a few inches below that. It probably started about 3 or 4 inches off your chest. You were able to accelerate the weight really fast off your chest because off the chest is not your weakness. But then from about 3 or 4 inches up, you were weak and the bar started to decelerate and it was able to glide another inch or two to about 6 inches off your chest. That's where it came to a halt. That's where you have your mid-sticking point, and then the bar came crashing down. But your weakness for that mid-sticking point actually started a few inches below where the bar stopped. So because of this, I would use boards around 2 to 4 inches thick because you're still going to be able to load the board press way heavier than a regular bench press, but you're going to ensure that you hit your entire weak range of motion where your weakness began that few inches before your sticking point. Overall, the board press is a fantastic exercise for loading heavy, building confidence and building strength through your mid-sticking point to help you slam all the way through to lockout. And the second exercise to help you overcome a mid-sticking point in the bench press is a Spoto press. So for those who don't know, a Spoto press is basically a partial range of motion bench press. It was popularized by a very strong bencher called Eric Spoto, and that is where it gets the name the Spoto press. So the benefits of the Spoto press are, first and foremost, you are going to be doing a partial range of motion and you are going to be able to lift more weight with the Spoto press than your regular bench press. This means that all of the benefits that I talked about earlier with using higher loads in the board press, they all apply to the Spoto press as well. But the second and main benefit of the Spoto press is that you are going to learn to use something called reversal strength. So reversal strength is where, when you're doing a rep, the bar is going to have downward momentum. It's going to be falling down with gravity. And reversal strength is where you have to learn to decelerate that bar, bring it to a standstill in the middle of the rep where your sticking point is, and then re-accelerate it upwards. So that is what a Spoto press is basically going to do, and this is going to be very challenging, and it means that when you go back to regular bench pressing, you obviously lower the bar all the way to your chest, and then you start pressing upwards and you have upward momentum going into your sticking point, as opposed to with the Spoto press you have downward momentum. You have to learn to decelerate it, stop it, and re-accelerate it upwards. So this reversal strength is going to carry over massively into your regular bench press. Then when you go into a regular bench press, you're going to have that upward momentum. It's going to be easy to blast through that mid sticking point to lockout. Now, what is important when you're doing a Spoto press is that you make sure that you do the range of motion of the Spoto press to a couple of inches below your actual sticking point. Just like I talked about in the board press, your true weakness, if you have a sticking point that's 6 inches off your chest, it's actually because you've started being weaker a few inches below that point. That's where the bar started to decelerate from maybe 4 inches off your chest. It's coasted up a little bit, hit 6 inches, and that's where it stopped. But your true weakness has actually started a bit below that mid sticking point. So it is important when you're doing the Spoto press to lower down to a few inches below your true sticking point. Overall, the Spoto press is fantastic for helping you overcome a mid-sticking point in the bench by teaching you reversal strength and how to generate power from your sticking point in the bench. And the third exercise to help you overcome a mid-sticking point in the bench press is a mid-range of motion rack lockout. So the first main benefit of a mid-rack lockout is that you are going to be able to use greater weights and loads because it is a reduced range of motion, just like in the Spoto press and the board press. So all of the benefits I outlined about using greater loads compared to a regular bench press, I talked about them in the board press. They all apply to the mid-rack lockout as well. However, the main benefit of the mid-rack lockout is that it is going to eliminate the stretch reflex, and you are going to have to learn to generate power from a dead stop from your sticking point. So the stretch reflex is something where on an eccentric portion of a movement, so where the bar is lowering down, your muscles and tendons store up energy that they then help fire the weight back up on a concentric portion of a movement. This is why a bouncing squat style is much easier than a paused squat style, because the stretch reflex helps fire the weight back up. And in the first two exercises that we talked about today, the board press and the Spoto press, the stretch reflex is very much involved. It will occur and be stored on the eccentric portion of the movement to help fire the weight back up on the concentric portion of the movement. However, with a mid-rack lockout, you have no stretch reflex involvement. You have to learn to press from a dead stop. You have to learn to generate all of your force with no upward momentum at all from that sticking point and without the assistance of the stretch reflex. So the mid-rack lockout is going to be very challenging, and it is going to help you learn to develop that force in your weak point all the way to help you press up to lockout. Now, in order for you to get the benefits of a mid-rack lockout, there are a few important points. The first one, similar to the board press and the Spoto press, you are having to actually generate from your weakness, which is a few inches below your sticking point. So just like that, set your pins on your mid-rack lockout to be about 2 inches below what your actual sticking point is. But the other important point with a mid-rack lockout is that, one, you make sure that you are using your regular bench press technique. It is very tempting to widen your grip, move the bar up towards your chin and flare your elbows. This is going to make you be able to press more weight in this mid-rack lockout. However, this is then not going to translate back to your regular bench press because you're using a completely different technique. So what is important is that you narrow your grip, tuck your elbows in, move the bar back down to your normal position and use your regular bench press technique on the mid-rack lockout. The other really important thing is that when you are doing multiple reps of a rack lockout, you obviously do then have an eccentric portion of the movement. So the eccentric of the first rep is going to occur before the second rep. What is important is that you pause the weight on the pins at the bottom if you are doing multiple reps, and you absolutely never ever bounce the weight up off the pins. That is going to involve the stretch reflex and it's going to involve momentum. You are literally going to be physically bouncing the weight off the pins. That is going to mean that your body is not doing the work, and it completely defeats the point of doing the mid-rack lockout. So what is important is that you do nice paused reps when doing a mid-rack lockout. That is it for today's video. I hope you did in fact enjoy the video. If you did, drop it a like, drop it a comment, subscribe, click the bell. If you want to either build strength, build muscle, or lose fat, Ironman, check out the link in the description below to see my coaching services. Thank you very much for watching and have a great day.